The morning light crept softly through the curtains, illuminating the room in a golden hue. Jason stirred slightly, the warmth of the early sun pulling him from the haze of sleep. His body felt heavy, but in a comforting way, like he didn't want to move, didn't want to disturb the peaceful moment he found himself in. That's when he realized he wasn't alone. His arm was draped over someone, over Ben. His broad chest was pressed against Ben's back, and his legs were gently entangled with Ben's under the blanket. Jason blinked, his mind catching up to the reality of the moment. He was the big spoon, holding Ben close, their bodies naturally molded together, as if they had always fit that way. For a moment, Jason froze, his mind racing. He hadn't meant to fall asleep like this. The last thing he remembered was the two of them watching the movie, Ben leaning into his chest, and the comforting silence that had wrapped around them like a cocoon. At some point, they must have fallen asleep together, shifting into this position without even realizing it. Jason's first instinct was to pull away, to give Ben space, but something stopped him. Ben was still asleep, his breathing slow and steady, his body warm and relaxed against Jason's. It felt good, natural even. Jason couldn't help but smile faintly, the corner of his lips tugging up as he let himself savor the moment for just a little longer. He glanced down, noticing how peaceful Ben looked in the soft morning light. His face was calm, his features softened in sleep, and Jason felt a strange sense of protectiveness wash over him. It wasn't something he had expected to feel, but it was there, undeniable and real. Jason shifted slightly, careful not to wake Ben, but the movement caused Ben to stir. He let out a small, sleepy sound, his body shifting back against Jason's, almost as if seeking more warmth. Jason's heart skipped a beat, and before he could think too much about it, Ben opened his eyes, blinking slowly as he adjusted to the morning light. Ben turned his head slightly, realizing where he was and who he was pressed against. His cheeks flushed pink, but he didn't move away. Instead, he offered a small, sheepish smile. "Morning," he said softly, his voice thick with sleep. Jason chuckled, his voice a low rumble. "Morning," he replied, his arm still loosely draped over Ben. I didn't mean to, end up like this." Ben shook his head, his smile growing a little. "It's okay. I don't mind." Jason felt a sense of relief at Ben's words, his body relaxing again. "Well, you were cold last night," Jason said, his tone teasing but gentle. "Guess I really am warmer than the blanket." Ben laughed softly, the sound light and genuine. "Yeah, I guess you are." For a moment, neither of them moved, the comfortable silence settling between them again. Jason thought about pulling back, giving Ben space to get up, but Ben didn't seem to be in any rush. Instead, he stayed where he was, his body still leaning into Jason's warmth. Jason hesitated before speaking again, his voice softer this time. "You okay with this?" he asked, his words careful and full of genuine concern. Ben nodded, his smile faint but sincere. "Yeah, I am." He turned his head slightly, meeting Jason's gaze. "More than okay, actually." Jason's heart swelled at the words, and he couldn't help but grin. "Good," he said simply, his hand giving Ben's shoulder a gentle squeeze before settling back around him. The quiet warmth of the moment lingered as Jason rested his head back on the pillow, his arm still loosely draped over Ben. The soft morning light made everything feel a little surreal, like the world outside didn't exist for now. Jason let out a small sigh, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. He began, his tone low and a little hesitant. "I haven't been like this with someone in a long time. Years, actually." He paused, his words hanging in the air, as if he wasn't sure he should have said them aloud. Ben turned slightly, adjusting his position so he could better look up at Jason. His expression was soft, curious, and patient, silently encouraging Jason to continue. Jason cleared his throat, feeling a bit vulnerable but also like he needed to get it out. "It's not just this," he said, motioning vaguely with his free hand. "I mean, being close to someone, letting myself, I don't know, be this open, I guess." Ben's gaze lingered on him, his brows furrowing slightly. "Why not?" he asked softly, his voice careful, like he didn't want to push too hard. Jason hesitated for a moment, his eyes drifting toward the ceiling as he gathered his thoughts. "I guess, after a while, I just stopped trying. Life got busy, you know? Work, other stuff. And the people I did meet, it just didn't feel worth it. Didn't feel like they'd stick around." His voice grew quieter, almost like he was confessing something he hadn't even admitted to himself. "So I just stopped. Figured I was better off alone." Ben listened intently, his chest tightening slightly at Jason's words. He could see the weight of what Jason was saying, the quiet vulnerability he rarely let show. "But you're not alone," Ben said softly, his voice full of warmth. Jason smiled faintly at that, his eyes flicking back down to Ben. "Yeah," he said, his voice soft. "Guess I'm not. Not right now, anyway." Ben adjusted himself again, rolling onto his back so he could look at Jason more directly. "You're not," he repeated, a hint of firmness in his voice now. "And you don't have to be." Jason's gaze lingered on Ben, the sincerity in his words striking something deep inside him. For a long moment he didn't say anything, just let the quiet comfort of Ben's presence fill the space that had felt so empty for so long. "Thanks," Jason finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For staying. For being here." Ben gave him a small smile, his eyes warm. "Anytime," he replied, his tone light but genuine. "I mean it." Jason nodded, his arm tightening slightly around Ben in an unspoken gesture of gratitude. "So, Jason began, scratching the back of his neck, his voice a little tentative. "What are you doing tonight?" Ben tilted his head, his curiosity piqued. "Not much, I think." "Why?" Jason gave a small smile, his tone casual but hopeful. "I was thinking, if you're free, you could come over again. We could hang out, play some board games, chat a bit, you know, see where the night takes us." Ben raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at his lips. "Board games, huh? Didn't take you for the competitive type." Jason chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, you don't know what you're in for. I've got a mean streak when it comes to strategy games," he teased, his grin widening. Ben laughed, the sound light and genuine. "All right, you're on, but don't expect me to go easy on you." "Wouldn't want you to," Jason replied with a wink, his tone teasing but warm. "So, you in?" Ben nodded, his smile softening. "Yeah, I'm in. Sounds fun." Jason felt a sense of relief wash over him, a little surprised at how much he was looking forward to the evening already. "Great. Let's make it a good night." Ben glanced at him, his expression thoughtful but amused. "I'll warn you now, though. I'm pretty good at making nights memorable." Jason smirked, leaning back against the pillows. "Good. Let's see if you can keep up." With that, they both shared a quiet laugh, the tension between them replaced by an easy, comfortable excitement. The day ahead might be busy, but they both knew the night was theirs, and neither could wait to see where it would take them. The day had dragged on for Jason, his mind constantly returning to the evening ahead. He couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and nervousness as he went through his usual routine. He had already cleaned the house twice, making sure everything was spotless, especially his bedroom. He didn't want to leave any detail to chance. Everything needed to feel just right. The living room was cozy, with the soft glow of warm lights flickering off the walls and the scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air. Jason had set up the board games on the coffee table, carefully arranging them so they were ready for the night ahead. He had even made sure there were enough snacks and drinks, just in case the evening stretched longer than expected. Jason walked through the house once more, running a hand over the couch and adjusting the pillows one last time, his mind racing. He kept telling himself it wasn't a big deal, that it was just a hangout, just a couple of friends spending time together. But as the hours ticked by and the sun began to set, he found it harder to shake the feeling that tonight might be different. The thought of Ben being here, in his space again, felt important. There was something about their connection that made everything feel more meaningful than it had before. It wasn't just a casual hangout anymore. Jason felt a shift, an unspoken understanding that this was the beginning of something, whether it was a friendship that was becoming something deeper or something else entirely. He wasn't sure yet, but the idea of finding out had his heart pounding in his chest. As the clock neared the time Ben had said he'd arrive, Jason's nerves were on edge. He paced around the house, checking his phone, then glancing toward the door every time a car passed outside, his anticipation building with every passing second. Finally, the sound of a knock on the door broke his cycle of overthinking. Jason rushed to the door, his heart racing. He quickly opened it to find Ben standing there, looking relaxed but with a small, playful smile on his face. "Hey," Ben greeted, holding up a bag of snacks. "Ready to get destroyed at some board games." Jason couldn't help but grin, relieved to see Ben looking so at ease. "You're on," he said, stepping aside to let Ben in. "Come on in. I've got everything set up." As Ben walked inside, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a casual hangout. There was something in the way Ben smiled, in the way they both seemed to fall into an easy rhythm, that made Jason feel like the night was already off to something special.